JavaScript Object Notation, aka JSON, aka nicely formatted data representation on the web. I'm pretty sure you've used it for all kinds of things, like HTTP requests, storage, configuration files, and so on. I also bet you had no idea about these features of the JSON. JSON object in JavaScript can do things like revive data, use a custom formatter to encode and decode data, and hide certain properties. Sounds interesting? Then let's get started. So first things first, let's create an object. Well, let's call the variable dish and let's assign it an object with properties like name, type, price, ingredients, which is an array, and restaurants, which is an object. Well, let's console log it out, but inside the console log, let's also use json.stringify, which in fact is gonna turn our object to a string. And let's pass dish inside. Let's save this file and let's go over to the console, write node index.js, and we get a whole long string as an output. Basically, this is the object, but represented as a long string. Let me pass two more options. We're gonna pass a null and a to. Don't worry, I'm gonna explain what the null means. But first, let's run the file again. And let's see that this time our object is represented in a different way, even though it's still a string. Well, let's look at what the new parameters mean. So we passed a replacer and a space. So to is actually a space. So we passed two spaces, which indented our object. Basically made it look better. We can actually change it to any custom value like random lol. And let's save and run the file again. And you're gonna see that it appended random lol to every line of the object. It looks kind of ugly, so let's remove this. Let's put 2 again. And let's now take a look at the replacer. So function that transforms the results. Replacer literally acts like a filter. It's going to accept a key and a value, and it's basically an anonymous function. So let's create a function. Let's also put an if statement, which is going to check whether the key is a price, for example. And if it's a price property, then we're going to return undefined. If not, we're going to return the normal value. Well, let's save this and go to the terminal to see what's going to happen now. And as you can see, the price suddenly disappeared. Well, it's because we returned price. Well, we returned undefined whenever it's price. You can actually leave it out and just leave as return, but make sure you don't put false, because if you put false, let's see, it's gonna return false value. So whenever you put undefined, it actually skips the value, but you can also put false or any other string, for example, not available, n/a, and let's run the file again. And you're gonna see that it assigned n/a to price. So it kind of works as a modifier and a filter at the same time. Well, another cool feature of this replacer is that you can actually pass an array. So let's create an array and pass name and a type inside this array. And what do you think is going to happen now? Is it going to filter and show properties other than name and type? Well, let's check. And no, it actually shows only name and type properties and deletes everything else. So this is kind of a reverse filter to the function that we had before. Well, the cool thing about this is that you can also work with arrays. So I'm going to format this object that we already have. I'm actually going to copy it. And I'm going to create a second object inside the array. Let's slightly change the values to hamburger. And, well, should be American, right? And let's change the price to 9.50. And let's save it. Let's run it again and see what we get in the terminal. Oh, wait, let's actually change the variable name to dishes to be correct. Right, let's save it, go to the terminal. And as you can see, it also works with arrays, which is perfect. You can basically use this replacer function whenever you need to modify the object on the fly. Well, let me show you another cool feature of the JSON object. Well, this time with classes. Let's create a class called fraction. And as any good class, it's going to have a constructor with two arguments, n and d. And n and d are going to be assigned to, first, a numerator, it's going to be n, and to a denominator, which is going to be d, just like this. And now let's create an instance of this class. It's called fraction equals new fraction. And let's pass, for example, 1 and 2. Let's console log this out and see what we get when we initialize this object, actually initialize this class. And let's clear it first, run node index.js. And as you can see, we have an instance of the fraction class with a numerator and a denominator 1 and 2 respectively. Well, what I didn't know at all is that you can actually define a method called toJSON, which is not going to accept anything, but let's return something interesting inside. Let's return a string, which is going to display in the numerator that we defined above, /denominator, so that our value is represented in a human readable format, so to say. Well, let's go down and create a second variable. Actually, no, let's simply run Json Stringify like we did before, but this time in a class instance. Let's save it, go to the terminal. Let's run, let's type it correctly. All right, we see that as soon as you pass an object, or actually a class instance, to Json Stringify, it looks for this toJSON method and returns whatever you put inside. In this case, numerator and a denominator in a string format. So let's assign it to a string to be able to keep track of it easily. And another cool feature is that you can also revive data from a string. So let's create a static method called fromJSON, which is going to accept a key and a value like this. And we're going to do again something interesting inside. We're going to check for the value. We're going to split the value. We're going to split it by a slash because we're going to pass this same string that we defined above, which divides 1 and 2 with a slash. So we're going to have an array with 1 and 2, and we're going to map through those just to make sure that those are converted to a number and not strings, just like this. And we're going to return a new instance of a fraction like this, and we're going to pass, of course, parts first index, actually 0 index, and parts index, not like this, go back, brackets 1, like this. And now let's use this string fraction in our json.parse method. We're gonna put a string fraction. Actually, let's hover over it and see what it accepts. So it accepts a valid JSON string and a reviver. Reviver is our fromJSON method. So we're gonna pass the string fraction, which is a string, and we're gonna pass this static method. So fraction.fromJSON and nothing else. Let's save it, go to the terminal, run node.index.js, and we get our class instance back from a string. How cool is that? Well, you don't really need to declare this reviver as a static method. You can simply remove it and declare somewhere outside of the class. So let's change the static to a simple function and remove this fraction and simply declare the fromJSON as a function. And now we're gonna save it. And let's go back to the terminal. Just make sure that it outputs the same thing, and it does. Numerator 1 and denominator 2. Now you can use these features in your own code when dealing with JSON. Just make sure you share this video with your colleagues before they see it. And big thanks to Siddharth for this great article. Go check more of his content on dev.to, link in the description. And as always, smash like and subscribe for more videos like this every week. And I'm gonna see you in the next one.